Helps with blood sugar regulation. So for years, I'm not that smart. I yell a lot, but I'm not that smart. And so for years when I was working with diabetics, I was telling them, take sprout juice or wheatgrass, which are complete proteins, and drink it, and it will regulate your blood sugar because of this high protein, and you'll get better. But how many people can stop their workday and make sprout juice? And finally, about 25 years ago, I woke up and said, my God, just tell them to take chlorella. Put it in your purse, put it in your pocket, put it in a plastic, and take it, and you regulate blood sugar. So where it used to take us 2 months to 6 months to reverse type 2 diabetes, now I'm seeing it in 2 days, 2 weeks, and 1 month because of this. The other thing is, overeaters like I was, food addicts, sugar addicts. It's good to say you shouldn't do it, but if you're an addict, it's like telling a heroin addict who doesn't get it to stop taking heroin. We're not going to stop. We'll find new ways to do it. My trick was I gave up white sugar and took up honey. That was my trick. Because the health book said honey's not sugar. It's sugar. Then when I learned that, I took up maple syrup. It was like a guy saying, well, I drink whiskey, I'll just go to wine. Oh, well, wine's not. Well, okay, I'll go to beer. That's exactly what it's like. May be helpful before chemotherapy. If you're enduring nuclear bombing of your body, and that's what it is, it's no different than what happened in Hiroshima in the Second World War. Oh, yes, it is. It's much stronger. Let me say that. It's much stronger than what they got in Hiroshima. Then basically you better do something to protect your body, and this is the kind of thing that you do. Back in the back, I don't know if they have it here, but years ago I created something, if you're enduring chemotherapy, called Chemozin. If you're enduring radiation, because you never get well from it, you just endure it at best. Then you take something called Interorins. And these are things because we know that every time you take nuclear bombs and stick them into your body, be it radiation or chemotherapy, you're going to destroy, for every 1 cancer cell that dies, 1,000 healthy cells. And that's why 93% of the people eventually die and don't change their lifestyle from these ungodly treatments that I promise you, a generation or 2 from now, we're going to say, you mean to tell me people who have a disease, you bomb them? Who came up with that brilliant idea? The same guy that thought leaching was a good thing? By the way, leaching is much more civilized than that. Leaching may seem a little weird to you. I think bombing a body with nuclear waste is a little bit weirder than that. Stevia. That's the answer. I wish I had that, because it took me a long time to get rid of the sugar. A long time. I'd be good, and then I'd be really bad. And I'd be good, and I'd be really, really, really bad. Then I'd be really, really, really bad and good occasionally. That's how it's hard to get over this, because it's everywhere. It's available. You go to the health store. Most, quote, products in the health store are riddled with sugar, but they trick you. It's not sugar, it's called xylitol. It's sugar. It's not sugar, it's called honey. It's not sugar, it's called maple syrup. It's sugar. The body doesn't distinguish it there. It doesn't say, here comes the bad guy, white sugar, and all the rest are good because I paid more money for it. It doesn't say that. And stevia is available. I think they even may have some here. I mean, that breaks people. That's been a godsend to us. Because it actually, gram for gram, is 100 times sweeter than sugar. So you need a pinch of it, and you think, your body thinks, wow, I'm getting sugar, but it has no negative effect. It doesn't feed cancer, it doesn't feed diabetes, it doesn't feed viruses, it doesn't feed bacteria, it doesn't feed osteoporosis, it doesn't feed any disease. Matter of fact, there are evidential studies done globally that show it helps to regulate diabetic and low blood sugar conditions. These are poisons. You've got to get your head around this. And the first step in recovering from an addiction is realizing that you're poisoning yourself. If what I said to you either provokes you or pisses you off today, that's not enough. You've got to act on this now. You've got to act on it. Just like I remember years ago, we did an intervention with my drunk uncle, who, by the way, would drink every single week his salary away, and his 6 children were starving to death. And the family was supporting him. And we went in and we did an intervention. Before they were called interventions, but I was just a boy in those days. I remember my uncle saying, I don't have a problem, I don't have a problem. I'll never forget that, I don't have a problem. And he died of this problem, and his children almost died of starvation in the problem. You've got to realize you have a problem. There's not one of us in this room, including Dr. Andrea and Dr. Brian Clement, who are not sugar addicts. There are a few of us, a handful of us here, that are recovering sugar addicts, but we're sugar addicts. Then the rest of you who are bullshitting yourself are just active addicts. And so you want to be an active addict, you want to clear up your life. And that's the proposition I'm asking you now. Look at this one. Things that make you go, How could it be that aspartame was once on the Pentagon's list of biological warfare chemicals, but now is supposed to be safe as a food additive? Want me to tell you the politics that surrounded that? Remember Saint Ronald Reagan? One of the worst presidents we've ever had. When they canonized him after his death. The guy had Alzheimer's half the way through his presidency. He invaded small countries and gave them drugs and traded drugs for guns, and now he's a great American president. We rewrite history all of the time. I'm sure if you took a lot of his Irish history, you could embellish it a bit too. But the fact of the matter is, he had a guy that worked for him, not called Reagan, but Reagan. How many of you remember that history? Reagan. And Reagan was whispered to by the chemical industry that the end of the Reagan administration is coming. And if you want to make $2 million a year as a consultant before the administration is done, take aspartame off the list as a biological weapon and allow us to put it into food as an additive. One man for $2 million a year for 15 years straight poisoned the human race. I have a book on my medical shelf, this thick, this large, called Aspartame Poisoning. It starts with variations in breast cancer and works down through 70% of all the diseases known to man. And we know the pathways. Scientifically, have figured out the pathways of how it causes brain cancer, cardiovascular disease, neuropathies in the body. This is creating paralysis in the body. And you're drinking this in diet sodas. Ironically, every study ever done on diet sodas where aspartame is shows that people who drink the diet soda generally at the end of the year weigh 12 pounds more than people who take straight sodas. Now, I'm not suggesting to drink straight sodas. I'm just showing you it's futile. My mother was a perfect example of that. The non-drinking drunk. That she would sit at the table with cake, but with the diet soda. And I would say to my mother, why are you eating cake? Well, I have a diet soda. You get it? Ants don't need biomedical confirmation for the fact that aspartame is toxic. Look at this. This is actually what happened. They tested this on creatures and animals who, by the way, still do have common sense. They still do have instinct. They're not doped up on food and being conned by industry. And when they see aspartame, not like you, they gulp it down thinking it's good for you. They actually avoid it. Look at how far those little ants go from there. It's like shocking, isn't it? And we say we're the smartest creature. I think we ought to reevaluate that one again. Honest to God. The usual route of travel for cancer is to the bone, brain, vital organs like the lung and liver. How do these cells get injured? There are three categories of carcinogens in our environment, and they harm our somatic cells. Chemical carcinogens, which is all the pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, additives we have in food, preservatives, clothing that you're wearing. You're sitting here in a health conference with me, and more than 70% of you are now wearing what we call oil on your skin, called polyester, nylon, man-made fibers. Even natural fiber clothes, all cotton, all linens, are often coated with formaldehydes and deadly chemicals. You've got to think big, people. It's not just about changing your diet to eating more sprouts. How's your house? How's your workplace? How's your stress load? We haven't even touched on that today. The number one cause of you doing all these goofy things. Then you have biological carcinogens. For many years, my colleagues kept debating with me, and I lost, and I'm happy I lost. They said, you know, viruses have something to do all the time with every form of cancer. And I said, wait a minute, cervical cancer and throat cancer, we know. But they said, well, what happens with a virus? Well, you actually know more than I knew in those days, because I showed you a photograph. That what happens is the virus gets into the cell. The viruses are smarter than you can imagine. They know if they screw themselves literally into a healthy cell, the immune system won't attack it. So if I screw something into a cell, do you think it's as strong as it should be? The answer is no. If I, by the way, even kill the virus in the cell, do you think it's easier to make that cell spin in the wrong direction and become cancer? And the answer is yes. So yes, viruses and people who have lots of colds and flus and viruses and chronic fatigue are highly susceptible to cancers. Highly susceptible to cancers. And physical carcinogens, what are they? You know, years ago, 45 years ago, all at once, the health industry, the cosmetic industry, the pharmaceutical industry said the sun is bad. You didn't have to worry about that much here. Well, the sun was bad all at once. And now, I know when I was first at school, they told the truth about the sun. The number one way to strengthen a basic immune system is sit in the sun. Now, that's factual, right? That's why all of you want to sit out in the sun. You're doing nothing and feel remarkable. But what happened is for 3 years I even bought it. I said, oh my God, you're going to get cancer again. Then I said to myself, why don't I look at the statistics of Africans? Because my God, if we're all getting cancer from the sun, the Africans must be wiped out. And these Indians down in South America, they must all be dead by now. And the statistic proved that we were wrong. That they didn't have any higher incidence of cancer, by the way, in Africa today than they did 50 years ago, nor did the indigenous Indians have any higher amount. Why is it in white, sick, mentally ill world that we live in do we have more skin cancer? Because after the Second World War, industry really took over. And in the last 20 years, it completely engulfed your governments. My government, your government, everything. Just completely controlled it. They blatantly show you they're controlling it, and nobody can do anything about it. And the fact of the matter is that when they started to control in the Second World War, after the war, they were making so much money during the war, the oil industry. They said, hey, let's not give up that level of profit. And so we create new industries. Pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides. And we'll tell the soft-hearted Irish and Americans and all this stuff, hey, this is going to save hungry people. Do you know that we have more hungry people alive today than we ever have in the history of humanity? You have more hungry people in Ireland per capita today than you had in 1860. And nobody knows that. But the fact of the matter is, that's how they passed it. And so now they started to spew all over the planet without any control, deadly chemicals. And then they got some professor from Trinity who they put on a payroll probably $500,000 over a 5-year period and said, Professor, will you get up and tell people how good this is? Well, we've done some really important studies, and although this kills dogs and although this kills animals, somehow it doesn't harm people. And so you think to yourself, well, Professor Schmuckahuka Schnickanicka at the University of Trinity over there, so they're smarter than me, so let's just chop down on this pesticides. And by the way, it costs less to take poison. I don't know anything else that they give you more and it costs less. You take organic food, you pay more for it. I don't want to die. Okay, you have to pay more. So then you have 70% of the population say, well, I can't buy organic food, I have to die. It's funny, but sick, isn't it? Think about it. Then all at once, we got money. Remember, we were poor people. Most people were really poor 100 and some years ago. Now we have this middle class happen. And we started to live it up. Well, we want to be like the rich folk. And the rich folk, by the way, were all chopping down on money. In what? Food. And what was the food they ate that the poor people didn't eat? Meat. Dairy food. The symbol of wealth. When I was a boy, the more meat, the more dairy food you ate, the more steaks you grilled, the more affluent you were. So now the middle class did this. Your governments worldwide subsidize the meat and dairy industry, so the poor and the middle class can eat it. And ironically now, all of us with money and brains stopped doing that nonsense, and the poorest people eating the most meat, the most dairy, the most sugar, and look at per capita diseases worldwide. I've looked at this. 42 years I've looked at it. The poorer you are in wealthy cultures, the more cancers, heart disease, diabetes, mental illness, the list goes right on. Why? I taught you today why. Now, you may want to debate this, but I'm telling you the truth. Men eating a lot of fish with high levels of omega-3 were more than twice as likely to develop aggressive prostate cancer than those consuming small amounts or none. Now, how come that's the opposite of what you've heard from the fish industry researchers? They're literally telling you, by the way, hey, omega oils, you're going to get better. It's good for your brain, it's good for your heart, it's good for your prostate, it's good for your breast. The fact is, real research shows you it's major danger. Major, major, major danger. Look at the magazine that you got when you came in. This magazine has the latest research from the top researchers. Another major conference we held was in New York City the first week of this year, called the Real Truth About Health Conference. And my colleague talks about the latest research on dairy and prostate cancer. Now you may say, well, if this were true, Dr. Shmaka Haka Mukamaka from Trinity would talk about this, not Brian Clement. Go ahead, leave those boys. They're the boys that bring you all the disease-causing drugs. Prostate cancer is the second leading cancer in men after lung cancer. And by the way, 3 men came up and talked to me. I'm going to give you some really interesting information. Now, if you listen closely, you'll hear the truth. If you don't want to listen, you'll walk out of here and not know what the hell happened. In Germany, they said, let's look at the 10 most well-done and